Right, when you bring a squid in, make sure you get your jig straight back in the water straight away. And it's also long enough, and this is important, to control the squid around the front of the kayak. So he's in front of me now and facing away from me. The net goes behind him and the ink goes away from me. Perfect example. So he's got it. See that? 2 for the price of 1. So that's why you always put your jig back in the water. So g'day everyone, beautiful morning. How good's this? I'm after squid, but I thought today I'd go a bit more in depth than my usual, just get out there and get some squid. I'll talk about a few tips and techniques, best way to fish from a kayak, best kayak to use, what gear to use, so on and so on. But anyway, let's get out on the water, start fishing, and we'll discuss when we're out there. Beautiful morning. Anyway, let's go. Oh, I love summer. Nice warm water. I'll probably get in and go for a snorkel a bit later. Get that jacket on. There's my first tip. If you're on a kayak, make sure you have the correct safety gear. No squid is worth more than your life. So let's go. And I suppose a good place to start is with the kayak. So I have a Hobie Outback, and I find the pedal driven kayaks instead of paddle driven just an ideal boat for squidding. It gives you the option of fishing hands free, which makes life so much easier. I'll show you why once we get out there and actually start fishing. But if you can afford it, a paddle if you can afford it, a pedal driven kayak, pedals, is definitely the way to go for this kind of fishing. And a bit of a tongue twister at the same time, apparently. Doesn't mean you won't catch squid in a stock standard cheap little paddle kayak, because plenty of people catch plenty of squid that way. But in my opinion, this is by far the best way of doing it. If you can afford it, get yourself a sounder as well. That just helps you to keep your depth constant, so you're not drifting into and out of shallow water. I find it helps to find the depth you want and stick to that depth, whatever that depth might be. Okay, so we're in the area where I want to be now, and I'll put the second camera in the water to show you the kind of ground you want to be over. So when you're chasing squid, you want to be over sort of weedy, sandy, broken ground, which is exactly what I'm over here. And as you can see, the water is just perfectly clear. It's this should be just a wonderful day for squidding. So let's get into it. So we know the water's nice and clear. I'm very confident. First things first, let's get a jig in the water. Okay, so jig's in the water, and this is all I do. I'll move at about a slow walking pace, and every so often I'll do this. Just a few flicks with the rod. And what I'm trying to imitate there is, I'm trying to imitate someone retrieving slowly from a a jetty or a rock platform or whatever it might be, with the advantage on a kayak that you don't have to bring the lure in, you don't have to bring the jig in at all. You just keep it in the water till you catch a squid. So just cruise along nice and slow and flick your jig, just like that. Alright, here we go. Here's our first customer. It's only a small one though. That's okay. It's another thing about squid, I mean, there's no size limit. So don't worry about if you're catching small ones or big ones, because they all taste good. And small ones are often better for certain recipes, so you don't worry too much about the size. Alright, let's get him in the net. And there's my second tip for kayak fishing for squid. Make sure you have a net. Don't try and grab them by hand. Have a net, makes life so much easier. Get that jig back in. And let's have a look at our first customer of the day. A relatively small one, but yeah, that doesn't matter. You got a generous bag limit of 15 a day for these, so 15 of them, that's plenty. Anyway, let's see if we can get a few more, eh? So my next tip would be about the size of the gear you're using. And you really don't need heavy gear or expensive gear. So this is my go-to squid outfit. Let me just get that glare out of the way a little bit for you. So this is my go-to squid outfit. It's a very cheap bargain basement Shakespeare amphibian that I bought years ago. Had a pretty crappy reel on it, so I replaced the reel, but that rod is 6 foot. It's very light, and it needs to be light because I'm doing this pretty much all the time when I'm fishing for squid. I'm always holding it, I'm always working the jig, so it needs to be light. The reel is a Fin-Nor Rampage, so again, pretty cheap reel, but not a crappy reel either, so I guess mid-range quality. That's a 2000, but you could go 1000 very easily. You don't need a big reel for that. You don't need a lot of line capacity because, I mean, you're catching squid, not Usain Bolt. There's no squid out here who's going to do a 100-metre dash with your line in 10 seconds, so you don't need a lot of line capacity. I like my line weight to be about 10 pound. Not so much for the squid, that just gives me a bit of pulling power to get my jig out of the weed if it gets stuck. So that's the gear. That's what I use for squidding. Pretty simple. There's another one. It's another small one, which is often the case here at Woody's. This is a place you get pretty much small squid with the occasional bigger model. But having said that, I caught my biggest squid ever here. Over near the groin actually. It was a monster. Yes, that was a ripper. This one isn't quite that size, but anyway, it's still a squid. Alright, let's get him in a net. There you go, and here's your next tip. When you reel a squid in, if I can get that jig out of the net, no, it's all tangled up. got it. Right, when you bring a squid in, make sure you get your jig straight back in the water straight away, because a lot of the time the squid will have a follower. Another squid will follow your squid up to see what's going on, and if they're here, 9 times out of 10 they'll grab that jig. So always put your jig back in the water. But anyway, let's have a look at this one. There you go, slightly bigger than the last one. That's good. A few of these will be a good feed. Okay, here we go. So on this one, I'll show you what I mean by avoiding getting inked. So many people get a face full of ink when they reel a squid in. This might not be a squid actually, this might be a fish. Oh no, it's getting attacked by fish. Often happens here with blowies. This is what I mean by avoiding getting inked. Actually, I won't do that on this one. Oh, look at this one. This one got smashed by blowies on the way in. Often happens here. Look at this poor bugger. Yeah, that was that bumping I felt on the retrieve. I thought it was a fish, but yeah, look at that. That's blowies. Blowies have smashed him on the way in. That happens. And it's still perfectly good squid, so yeah. Woodman Point blowies. Feral. So another thing to consider is just being persistent. And sometimes it goes quiet, but this method works. So the trick is just to keep at it. And sometimes it goes quiet for whatever reason. Keep at it. It can change in an instant. It'll go from nothing happening to just squid after squid sometimes. So yeah, another tip, persistence. Just keep working away at it. There we go. Persistence. Keep at it. So this one, I'll try again. I'll show you the method I use to avoid getting inked. So, of course, when you're reeling in a squid or a fish, you're reeling it directly towards yourself. But what you can do in a kayak is this. So he's coming in pretty much straight at me. So what I'll do to avoid the ink is I'll turn the kayak so he's coming from directly behind me. Use the rod to control him. So he's in front of me now and facing away from me. The net goes behind him and the ink goes away from me. Perfect example. So he's still pointing away from me. Let's get the jig back in the water. And that's basically how you avoid getting inked while you're squidding. So there's plenty of ink there, as you can see, and the squid's facing away from me. There you go. Simple stuff. There's I mean, everyone gets inked while they're squidding at some point. It's pretty much unavoidable, but that's the best way I know to avoid it most of the time. They're pretty sneaky. One will get you eventually, but anyway, avoid it most of the time, I guess, is the lesson there. Okay, while we're sitting still, I'll just talk about rod length for a second. So I think I mentioned before, this is a 6-foot rod, which I find ideal for squidding from a kayak. It's long enough to give you that whipping action. If you have a really short rod, you don't get much of an action. And it's also long enough, and this is important, to control the squid around the front of the kayak. So if I catch a squid on that side and I want to bring him to the net on this side, I've got plenty of length in the rod to bring it around the front of the kayak. You don't want to go too long, and I've got another rod here to demonstrate. So this is a 7-foot rod. If I'm trying to catch a squid with this rod, because it's got that extra foot of length on it, I'm going to be leaning further out to try and net it, and that's not a great idea on a kayak. If you lean out too far, that's a good way to overbalance and you'll end up swimming. So I mean, I've caught plenty of squid with this rod. It doesn't mean it's no good, and I use this for tailor fishing as well, so I get plenty of use from this from a kayak. But for this kind of fishing, squid fishing, 6 foot is the ideal length for me. Like I said, as long as you can get around the front of your kayak, that's as long as your rod needs to be. Anyway, let's get some more squid. Alright, so my rod's out. I got it in the rod holder. This method works, just straight trolling, but it's much better if you're moving the jig. But I just want to show you what jigs I generally use. So the jigs I like using are pretty much natural bait fish patterns. So I don't go for too many bright fluoro kind of colours. That's a bit of a funny one, bit of a flower pattern there. That was a bit of a novelty, to be honest, but that one works. But generally I'm looking at this kind of thing. This is what I've got on this rod. This is 2.5, I've got a 3.0 on this rod. Looks like a small bait fish. I generally like using white jigs, they're good. I also like browny coloured jigs. So, well, that's not brown, what do we got in there? There's a bit of pink, green, white, but it generally looks, you can imagine that being a small wrasse or something. So 2.5, 3.0, and that's generally the size jigs that I use. I'm not that concerned about colour. That doesn't mean colour doesn't matter. And you ask the experts, they'll be talking about red foils, gold foils, clear jigs, all sorts of stuff. I don't tend to worry too much about any of that. I focus on the movement. So getting that jig moving is far more important, in my opinion, than colour. So, but I mean, do your research, look into it, because a lot of people think colour is the most important thing for squid jigs. Me personally, I don't think that. I think movement is the most important thing. Yep, there we go. Movement. Yeah, you can see how clear the water is here. This is just perfect for squidding. You see the size of the eyes on squid. You can see why they're such a visual predator. So clear water like this is just perfect. Perfect hookup, right on top of the head. In the net, got him. Jig goes back in, just in case. Another one, ripper. Good stuff. stuff. It's good morning. Here we go. The nice squid, that makes half a dozen. Well, if I get it to the boat, that'll make half a dozen for the morning, which is a good morning on the water. There he is. Let's bring it in. Gotcha. Bit smaller this one, but that's okay. As I said, they all taste good. And there's a very generous bag limit of 15, so 15 of them, that's a great feed. Not that I'll take 15 this morning, but I could if I wanted to. Alright, here's another one. Let's get this one to the boat. And this might be my last squid for the day actually, because there's another tip for you. Consider your own comfort. That wind's starting to spring up, so it's not uncomfortable yet, but it will be soon, so I'm going to start heading in. I'll fish on the way in, so I'm aiming to get another squid, but this might well be the last one. That's fine, I've already got a good speed. Oh, this is probably the best squid of the day too. Let's have a look at this one. Oh, hang on, he's got a mate. I don't know if you can see it, but there's another squid right behind him, so I'm going to attempt. This is what I was telling you about with the 2 jigs. So we'll get rid of that, we'll put that jig straight back in. So he's got it. See that? 2 for the price of 1. So that's why you always put your jig back in the water. Always. So let's get this one in the net as well. And there you go. That's why you always put your jig back in the water. So there you go, 2 squid for the price of 1. That first one was the bigger one, and that smaller one followed him up. So awesome. That's a great way to finish, a great example of what I was talking about. But as I was saying, the wind sprung up now, so I'm going to head straight in. We'll have a look at the squid on the beach. I'll fish on the way in, so maybe I'll get another one. Who knows? Alright, here we go. Last bonus squid for the session. It's always a good idea to fish on the way in. Let's get this one to the boat, and that'll do us for the morning. That's a good haul of squid. Only a little one, this one. That's okay. Here he is. That'll do me right away. Yeah, there you go, just a little one, but gratefully accepted. Anyway, let's head into the beach now and have a look at the catch. And before we hit the beach, I'll just make one more point about squidding. So the title of the video is how to catch plenty of squid. Depends what your definition of plenty is. So you've got a bag limit here in WA of 15 per day, which is very generous. That's plenty, that is so much. I've got I think 8 or 9 in the bucket. We'll count them when we're on the beach. and that's more than I would generally take. Usually I'm about half a dozen or so, and that's what I consider to be plenty. So, you know, while you could take 15, I could stay out here and catch 15 easily. Do I need to? No, of course I don't. I've got plenty for a meal and probably 2 meals in the freezer, and I'll keep the heads for bait for fishing. So that's plenty. That is plenty of squid, even though I haven't bagged out. So one to consider, your definition of plenty. Righto, let's check out today's catch. See what we got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 squid. That's a great feed there. And like I said, that is plenty. I don't need to bag out. That's just plenty of squid. That's a great feed. So there you go. That's how to catch plenty of squid from a kayak and avoid getting inked. Hope you got a few tips there, and hope it inspires you to get out and catch some squid. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. Tight lines. See you next time. Oh.